we're going to start moving over to the live Q&A and leading the moderation of the panel, going back to Kawin. And I'm going to be putting the questions on the screen. And everyone, if you could do two things that's listening in right now. Number one, there's quite the discussion in the discussions channel. And the other thing you'll end up seeing is that if you could look at the questions, there are a couple links in there that are going Slido. Please upvote down, well, not downvote. You could just upvote the questions you find most interesting for the panel. But Kawin, do you want to start off with just a general chat with the rest of the speakers on some of the key takeaways that you guys are working on?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rob. So hopefully this was a great first session to blow everyone's mind to talk about quantum computing. We planned it so that I introduced the basics, right? Level set. It's like taking you on a flight, a quantum flight where everyone is taking off, level setting, understanding the basics, and taking off to seeing what quantum's all about, these exciting opportunities and the potential threats and what's happening, private public sector and all that. So I'd like to thank Marin, Konstantinos, and Mark for some very interesting talks. Hopefully everyone can really understand some of the proper steps on how to mitigate these risks and the risks that are coming. So with that, we can read off the questions, but I wanted to really wrap my head around some interesting things to think about. So I'll probably pick on a few of the panelists here. So let's start out with this. Let's imagine a future where the digital locks protecting everything from your bank account to national secrets could be effortlessly picked. While quantum computers aren't there yet, and I know in the chat people are saying, there's emphasis on it could, it would, it should, it may, right? Experts say there is a real possibility nonetheless. What single aspect of our current digital lives would you most be concerned about if this ultimate key became available? And what fundamental shifts in how we secure information do you think would become necessary? So let me throw this over to Mark.
Wow, this is a really good question. So I worry about sort of a number of things. I worry about people, capturing our data, the so-called store now, decrypt later attack, where people will capture data and then they'll decrypt it later when they have a computer, when it sort of come about. And I think that's certainly one threat. But I also worry about the things we can't detect. Notice in the PQC list, there are 2 new signatures and only 1 new key exchange. I think that's quite important, quite informative about the kinds of threats we're trying to mitigate. Personally, I worry most about things like, how is identity going to change? How are we going to really sort of understand, so much of it's tied to cryptography. How are we going to develop a better way of doing it? And how do we make that methodology agile? So for me, personally, I worry more or most about identity. And then I also worry about our data being hoovered up and then broken at a later date. So I'll start with those.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Konstantinos, any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, building on that, for me, I think about the lifetime of a secret, right? So for me, it's what's that lifetime? Do I care about credit card data? Do I care anything like that? No, that's ephemeral. It doesn't matter if in 5 years someone reverses my credit card number; it'll be different by then, in some aspect, even if it's just the code. But when it comes to the long shelf life of secrets, it's already too late. So that's like a different way to spin this question. If you've been sending the Coca-Cola secret recipe around with RSA, it might turn up as a quantum Coca-Cola one day. So keep that in mind. It's already too late for some things.
That's a great one, Konstantinos. Thank you. Marin, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. And so a bit of context. I spent most of my career in cyber physical systems security. So cyber kinetic security, any kind of cyber attack that can cause impacts in the real physical world. Cyber attacks that can impact well-being, lives, or the environment. And I can't switch that off. So for me, the biggest threat is that the fact that in our current world, we very often have lives protected by cryptography, not just credit cards or information or identity or, stealing some information, but actual physical impacts are being protected by cryptography. And this is where my two careers kind of now converge, because quantum is coming, whether it's in 7 years or in 15. But if you really want to change some of these OT systems or the cyber physical systems, it does take 15 years to change them. And they are protecting lives and the environment with cryptography. So that's where my biggest concerns go to.
Great. Thank you very much, Marin. Yeah. This kind of question, I wanted to use this analogy to make, the threat really tangible. So I want the audience to really consider the broad impact and necessary shifts that we have to think about in terms of, mitigating the threats. What will impact in terms of not only what Marin said, the lives of people, like which World Economic Forum says is the top threat, right? The number one thing that people look at is human lives. So that's something to really think about. Other things, one other question before we go to the panelist questions that I've thought about is, if, to say, a powerful quantum computer fell into the wrong hands, be it a rogue nation or a sophisticated cyber criminal organization, what single most impactful cyber attack scenario do you envision becoming possible that is currently unthinkable? And maybe I'll throw it back to you, Marin. Any thoughts on that?
Well, my answer is the same. Look, if we get CRQC and if we could start being able to factor 2048 RSA or break the ECC keys in a relatively quickly, that's kind of where I have to go. If we generate a forged private key for a PLC vendor's root signing certificate in hours, an adversary can cause a huge amount of real world damage.
Absolutely. Konstantinos, any thoughts on that?
Sorry, I was just answering some questions in Slack.
No worries.
If you could just hit me with the question again. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, if a powerful quantum computer fell into the wrong hands, right? A rogue nation, sophisticated cyber criminal organization, what single most impactful cyber attack scenario do you envision becoming possible? That's currently
so those nation states have already been harvesting our packets, right? That's just been their modus operandi for years, and not even necessarily for quantum. They're just hoping to find something else too, some other side channel, some other weakness, some other cryptographic flaw that we haven't thought of yet. And maybe some AI attack that amalgamates data and finds patterns and things like that. So they've been harvesting for a while now. So any kind of state secrets are already at risk as a result. So those need to be migrated as soon as possible. So it's kind of like that same answer, if they get that kind of equipment. The other thing worth looking at in the future, and I'm looking at this, is what about the non-nation states, right? Most people use quantum computers on the cloud. How far down the stack can you protect the access to a quantum computer to make sure people aren't doing nefarious things with it? So I've been looking at that problem recently, and I'll be talking about that eventually.
All right, looking forward to that thought, Konstantinos. Thank you. Mark, over to you. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, echoing what Konstantinos said, like we see, a lot of the parts of a quantum computer are actually quite classical. They're cloud queues, they're SSH logins, and we've even disclosed default passwords in existing implementations, which have now been remediated and fixed. So, there's the infrastructure itself. And I think about things like CNI a lot. I work at a bank, so we are always wondering, like, sort of, not just how do we do, better mortgage offers, but how do we actually make sure that people don't go unbanked? And we've seen, just by accidents and mishaps in the last few years, and also, so more malicious and nefarious activity, we've seen all sorts of issues with, say, power cuts in entire countries, which, was thought of as being, unheard of. And now it's happening because certain things are under certain strains and it doesn't take much. So a quantum computer quantum computation being able to break a lot of the cryptography that locks those things in, then it does it in ways that you wouldn't necessarily detect. I think that's the real problem. If someone was storing now, decrypting later, and they started doing it, you might notice. If a nation state's doing it, you probably don't notice. But if someone, a criminal group, say, starts drinking signatures, there's no real detection for that. It's a major shift in how things are done that actually we only know when we have enough information of it having been done. So I think that there's a fundamental shift in how we treat things, such as so that zero trust model. How do we enhance that and build that so that we can get earlier detection, especially around things like CNI in particular?
Yeah, before we go to the questions, no comment here, and thanks for that, Mark. I mean, we haven't really touched even on the subject of AI and quantum. AI, since ChatGPT got released a couple of years ago, it's just blown up, right? And everyone's leveraging it. I'm a professor at a university. We have detections for AI generated papers. So even doing work itself is becoming more efficient. But imagine the power of AI, which the challenge with AI is the energy you need to compute, right? That's why data centers are being built left and right. But with quantum, you're making the efficiencies in terms of computational power. Putting that together, are we looking at the future now, a possible real Skynet? A self-aware one that can think to themselves at an exponential level, right? That's something to think about, and for the audience to think about. I'm not sure if you want to comment about that, Mark.
Well, I mean, at the moment, quite a few LLMs are confidently wrong. So I think that some of the threats are stymied by that. But hey, we're on a trajectory that maybe some saw coming, maybe some didn't. We're using much more energy. We're building huge amounts of data centers and housing massive amounts of compute. Like data centers are, I think I read about like they are by volume the largest buildings we have ever made. We don't know where they are, and they're not designed for humans to go in, which I think is just an amazing, like, so that tells you how much we're putting into this digital infrastructure and how much of our lives are being captured by it. So I think that, there are quantum enhancements on artificial intelligence. In some areas, the jury's out of it has a real effect. In other areas, there seem to be some promising developments. There have even been papers on hacking quantum machine learning models. So I think that it's as exciting as you could imagine it to be. Unfortunately, we don't have another day to talk about, I think, some of these interesting threads.
Great, thank you, Mark. Any comments on AI plus quantum, Konstantinos?
Yeah, so this comes up a lot. If anyone listens to the Joe Rogan podcast, same haircut as me, right? Anyway, yeah, I have like alerts set because he mentions quantum and AI 3 times every episode. He just does. It's kind of crazy. And he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he mentions it 3 times a day. And he's fascinated with this idea of that AI, the only thing it needs to become, super AI is quantum. And like, while there might be something quantum that might help AI along, it's not just this like marriage that's going to happen and wow, now it's running on quantum, so it's better. It's a larger problem. People don't realize that quantum computers can't do everything. And they're never going to replace classical computers. It's just never going to happen. You're never going to run Microsoft Word on a quantum computer. It's never going to happen. It's always going to be a specialized scientific tool in a data center. You've got your Turing machines that are operating most of computing. You've got your Polygon creation machines, which ended up being better at Bitcoin and AI than they ever were at gaming. And now we've got these linear algebra machines operating in higher Hilbert space that are quantum computers that do very specialized things. You're not going to do just anything on them. So all types of AI just won't run on them. That said, there are things like the concept of AI for quantum. So, like Q-Control is doing something pretty cool there. They're using AI to help along quantum processors and suppress errors that build along the way, which gets us to fault tolerance. And then you have this idea of quantum for AI, like what can you do to prepare data, and make training of AI more efficient. Tensor networks are great there too. You can compress neural networks and do things like that. I've messed around with tensor networks for years too. So that's some of the more real stuff. And then there's quantum machine learning use cases, like some of the stuff like Mark was getting into too, I guess. But quantum machine learning use cases, that's something very real. It's not an LLM exactly, but it's using things like quantum binary classification for fraud detection and things like that I do lots of use cases on. So those are some of the more real world uses of these two things merging and having a baby, if you will.
Absolutely. Thanks, Konstantinos. Marin, any comments on AI and quantum?
Yeah, I never thought I would agree with Joe Rogan or anything, but okay, I agree on this. I think that quantum, when it becomes available and commercially feasible, will improve some parts of training and inference exponentially, massively. And that will take AI capabilities to a whole other level. Again, certain AI capabilities, not all of them. Like Konstantinos say, quantum is always going to be a coprocessor, not a generic one doing everything. But yes, AI will be greatly boosted by the arrival of quantum, whenever that might happen.
Right. Thank you, Marin. Let's move over to the questions. Rob, do you want to ask the questions here and we can just all take it? Or I can read off it. I have it online.
I think it'd be easier if you just read the questions at the top of the screen.
Sure.
And I'll just clear
Okay.
them as you guys are going.
Sure. Sounds good. All right. So first question for us is, so I've heard that the don't have a reusable quantum computer platform yet. What is the real status of where are we with quantum computers? Okay. Anyone want to take this?
Happy to
I
try,
guess.
although Konstantinos and Mark will probably
So
do much
where
better.
are we timeline wise?
Mhm.
All right, this year we're going to have 50 logical qubits. Okay, that's 50 error corrected qubits. That is a significant achievement because you cannot simulate that in a true state vector simulation with any classical hardware on the planet. Like we're going to finally have something new for the first time in computation history for decades. It's something new. It'd be like if I went back in time and to the 80s and handed someone an M4 MacBook and said, have at it. They wouldn't know what the hell to do with it at first, but pretty soon they would. And it would blow anything else. So that is a significant moment. That said, 50 qubits will not crack encryption. It won't do anything in the threat side. Within a couple of years, we're going to have about 100 something logical qubits. Now, whenever you add a qubit, you, in theory, double the power of an error-corrected quantum computer. So it's hard to conceive of how much more powerful 100 qubits are than 50 logical qubits. So 100 logical qubits, that's solving problems in chemistry and other areas that we just can't even conceive of right now. So these are exciting times, but we have a long way to go until we get to the thousands of error-corrected qubits. And I don't think we're ever going to even really get there with most of these modalities in one box. I do think quantum computers are going to be a combination of little boxes, either in the same room or not. We might find that you can only do 50 logical qubits in one modality in one little box. So IBM can't get past that maybe. Who knows? We don't know what the number is. But we're going to find some ideal number of logical qubits. And then we're just going to cut and paste. We're going to have machines that are interconnected because qubits don't really care where they are in time and space. And you can have these machines connected. And that's how we're going to probably scale realistically. PsiQuantum wants to build 1 million qubits. But when you talk to them in detail, they admit it's going to be a bunch of little boxes inside with some number that they're not releasing. So that's how I think we get there. We're going to find something ideal and scale up.
All right, we're just going to go to the next question. Kawin, if it's okay, we'll just have one of the speakers tackle one and then move to the next question.
That's fine. Okay. Next question. Do we need to replace the hardware we are using today to implement post-quantum cryptography or PQC? What are the minimum hardware specifications?
You can't answer the minimum hardware specifications. There's way too many unknowns. But it turns out that most of the hardware you're using will run MLChem just fine. It will. There are challenges that happen with certain types of hybrid. For hybrid, you have to dumb down your level of post-quantum because things like MTU sizes won't support what you're putting out there. So let's say MTU size of 1400. If you try to do level 5 ML-Chem plus ECDSA underneath, it's just going to fragment. It won't fit. So you're going to have to use like level 3 ML-Chem. So you'll be dumbing it down. So there's things like that that you have to play around with. But if you go pure ML-Chem, for example, most modern hardware will run it. And if it won't, it's probably hardware you won't want running by 2035 when the migration is mandated. So think of it that way. You know, you have a long time. And I almost envy companies that are brand new to the space, right? If you're a new company in 2 or 3 years coming into the world, like, I'm born. I just came out of the company womb. Here I am. I'm a new company. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Every single thing you buy is going to be post-quantum. It's like my favorite example is like the early days of Wi-Fi. People used to argue 802.11b. You can't use 802.11b. You have to use 802.11. Insert other, protocol here. But nowadays, when you buy Wi-Fi, does anyone even slightly consider what it's running? No, because it's all the same now. It's all achieved standardization. So in a few years, none of this will matter. All new hardware will support it. And like I said, if it's hardware you're not going to want to run in the 2030s, then it's hardware you're not going to want to run in the 2030s. So that pretty much will take care of almost all the hardware concerns.
Right. Excellent. All right. Next question we have. What is the risk of Q-Day to the crypto markets? Very interesting one. Anyone want to answer that? If not, I can tackle it.
I can jump in on this one. Look.
Okay.
There are risks. I mean, crypto is all about using asymmetric cryptography and hashing. And as the panelists explained, cryptographic or most of the asymmetric cryptography in use today is going to be broken, and the hashing is going to be weakened. So yes, there is a risk to crypto. Every aspect of the crypto has some level of risk, but on a positive side, all of the big cryptocurrencies, Ethereum, Bitcoin, and the others are already mitigating that risk. So I think that there is going to be some challenges once CRQC arrives. In theory, it should be possible to get a private key out of the public key, and there are some legacy Bitcoins in the original, pay to public key, which are exposing public keys on the blockchain. So in theory, they could be broken once we have CRQC. But again, in real life, I think it will be mitigated on time just because they are taking it seriously and acting much earlier than many other organizations currently.
Thank you, Marin. And just think about it this way. I mean, we're talking about, breaking ECDSA, right? But look at other things that quantum computers may potentially do, right? Falsifying digital signatures, for example. So that would lead to acceptance of fraudulent transaction on the blockchain, right? So it defeats the whole purpose of the blockchain. Other things like even, let's talk about mining, right? Quantum computers with the computational power might even outperform, classical computers in mining. So it would disrupt and destabilize the proof of work consensus mechanisms. So that's other things to think about in terms of crypto.
That's
right?
Yeah, that's still a might. One thing also is there's another threat to all cryptocurrency from a quantum computer. If someone respected enough in the industry puts out the message that he thinks or she thinks that there is a quantum computer capable of cracking Bitcoin, what does that do to the economy? When Elon Musk once tweeted that Bitcoin is bad for the environment, so Tesla won't use it, it dropped 30% in one day. What happens if Elon Musk one day gets cheeky and says, I think a quantum computer can already crack Bitcoin? Or someone moves one of the crypto canary coins, like if someone moves one of Satoshi Nakamoto's coins, boom, Bitcoin is 0 the next day. No one will ever use it again. So there's those other perception risks. So I think we need to hurry up and get those post-quantum because they have to be protected against that just word of mouth kind of thing too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Konstantinos. All right, next question we have. For someone looking at learning more about quantum cryptography, do you happen to have suggestions on any books or reading materials to get started?
we could probably submit one each, couldn't we, really? But on the quantum side, there were some really nice books. Everything from the Wired book by Dieter, I forget the surname, sorry. But there's a Wired book on quantum computing that's very straightforward, very easy to access. On the more textbooky side, there's Quantum Computing and Applied Approach, which is quite a low cost, easy access volume, covers some modalities, gives you a primer in how to program or start programming these things and what a quantum algorithm is and how it might work. On the post-quantum security side, I mean, I quite like Serious Cryptography by JP Masson, because if you really need to worry about the details, that's probably where you need to go. And there
stole
are some
mine.
other. Sorry.
It's in a second edition, by the way. Second
It
edition.
is in the second edition,
Yeah,
and actually,
great.
it's a very approachable book. That and also, if you've got questions, I've emailed JP and I've had an answer. I was on a panel with him at Black Hat. Like he's a nice guy too. So like sort of a very good human, great hacker, brilliant cryptographer. And I think, you know, so on the PQC side, that'll give you a really solid point. If you need more, his reference section is where I go to. So.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of learning platforms as well, there's a plethora of them, right? I think I'm not endorsing them in any way, but Querica is actually really good. Qureca, Querica. They have some basic courses, foundations of quantum computing, and also maybe even aspects of quantum computing for business strategy, which I've taken. And it's very affordable prices. And if you don't want to go up another level, like MIT has some courses that I've taken that are very good. Some of the math, if you've seen Konstantinos, that's going over most of our heads, you know, they have that in terms of the level 2s, level 3s, but foundational knowledge on quantum is there. Okay, let's go on. For someone looking to, no, we already read that. For small organizations that don't have dedicated resources to address quantum, what should they do? Is the best approach to move to cloud and trust vendors? Oh, interesting. Anyone want to take that?
Well, I mean, for your on-prem, I think you should have some kind of assessment done. There's so many gotchas potentially that if you don't know what you're doing, they're going to get you potentially. But someone can feel free to build in on this. But when it comes to cloud, this is the first time that selling cloud should be easy to people. You know, in the past it was, I don't want my data in a cloud. I want to keep it here. But when you consider that AWS had the first hybrid post-quantum cryptography, and now Microsoft is doing a whole quantum ready push, and Google, of course, is going to do the same thing. It's pretty obvious that cloud workloads will be post-quantum safe before anything on-prem will be, realistically. So any workloads that move to the cloud will probably get there first. That's just high level.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, let's go. I hear a lot of I think we've answered this, and possible, and in a few years. Is it really possible? Has it been demonstrated, or is it a possible idea? Is it theoretical? We kind of answered this one.
So because you're talking about Shor's algorithm?
I think just quantum computers in general, because we're always saying the potential is there, it could happen, but it's always, is it theoretical or is it actually happening?
Well, we know quantum computers work, obviously. I mean, I use them all the time. But when it comes to Shor's algorithm, we also know that works. We can run it on small numbers to show. Yeah. It's just the claim we're making is that we don't have fault-tolerant quantum computers that can have the circuit depth required to do all these operations to get the factorization of those really large numbers. It's hard for people to conceive how big the numbers are we're talking about here. You know, it's exhausting to try and even like write them out. Yeah, they're gigantic numbers. So we don't have the circuits that can stay alive long enough before they decohere. So yeah, it's proven that they work. We just don't have anything big enough to run it yet. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I can add here, I think there's lots of ways to prove that it is a real thing. There are ways to simulate the algorithms and the quantum computer capabilities. There are ways to break down the problem and demonstrate a quantum advantage on one small subset of a problem. There is a subcategory of quantum computing, quantum optimization or quantum annealing, which already is operational and does provide some value already, but for a very, very limited set of problems that can be posed as an optimization problems. So it's not purely theoretical. We know exactly what kind of problems quantum computers will be able to solve much better than classical, or maybe classical wouldn't be able to solve it at all. And we know how many logical qubits we would need to actually solve that particular problem. And that's why we are so excited about quantum computers, because in the last year and a half or 2 years, there was a bunch of papers that were released in protein folding, in pharma, in material science, demonstrating even quantum advantage on a very small, very specific problem. Just a few days ago, D-Wave Systems demonstrated a quantum advantage on a very, very specific materials problem. So we know it's real, but as Konstantinos said, we need to keep building up the logical qubits to actually start tackling more of these problems.
Okay, I'm going to nerd out here, and I think Rob and Chris will love this. This reminds me of a scene in, I think, one of the Iron Mans. I think Iron Man 1 or 2. I think probably 2, where Tony Stark's dad tells him, "Son, you know, we know the science is there. We don't have the technology to develop it. You have the technology." So he invented a new element or something, right? I think that was Iron Man 2. So the same paradigm comes around here. It's like, we know it's going to happen. We know it's being developed. The question is when, right? But with all these advances happening, again, Microsoft Majorana chip, AWS is coming out with one, Google Willow, right? Even NVIDIA doing QPUs now, not just GPUs, but getting to the quantum game. They know it's a big potential and it's a possibility, right? I think we have 4 minutes left, so let's go with the next question here. What concrete steps should organizations take today to prepare for potential quantum threats to encryption and data integrity regarding sensitive data? I think that's just the steps that Marin has already highlighted in his talk, in terms of proper steps in doing post-quantum cryptography migration, right? Doing cryptographic inventory scanning, prioritizing the most vulnerable ones, and then securing that using the latest algorithms that were approved or standards by NIST that Konstantinos and Mark have already shown. All right. How does third party add to this complexity of inventory, mitigate, monitor crypto agility? Interesting one.
I'll start on this one. I'll start on this
All
one.
right.
I think that your vendors and your supply chain are going to have to do the same things that you're going to have to do. So you should start asking them the same questions you're asking yourself. You know, ask your vendors for a CBOM. Okay, you're already asking them maybe for an SBOM. You're asking them for assurance about development and life cycles of the company and that kind of thing. Start asking them for CBOMs. Start asking from them the data that you're asking of yourself, and as you go on the journey and you realize what you need to know about what you're doing, you need to do that from your vendors as well. And they'll be cooperative, because if you're asking it, lots of other people will start asking it and it'll start moving. And I think we're just going to get to this point where people will start going, okay, yeah, here's everything I'm doing. The way that we had it for open source disclosure for the last 10, 20 years, we're now going to have that for cryptography and SBOMs and more. And it's just going to become yet another information asset class. It might even turn up in service now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think many vendors are already, saying we have quantum resistant algorithms deployed at our firewall level, at our, WAF level. So it's not like it's going to be one big change. Things are coming and happening already. Okay. We have 2 minutes left. I'll take this last question. If you don't fully know, it disappeared. Okay.
All right. Go and take the next one, as I don't know how to recover a question.
Okay.
That's pretty
We are
cool.
already, we are already discussing QBOM, quantum bill of materials, to maintain inventory of all the crypt certs protocols. Any practices started on this topic?
If the question is about the standards or the frameworks, there are some initial approaches on defining that CBOM. but I don't think there is anything anything that is widely accepted or that would make it much easier for the listeners here to apply it tomorrow.
I mean, I'll disagree there, just to be spicy. Mainly because
Well, Mark, you showed us some, so go ahead.
so actually, Cyclone DX integrated IBM's CBOM proposal into main branch end of last year. So we are starting to see open source SBOM, because CBOM is a subset of SBOM, right? Because you know, you're trying to line it all up, all these assets with all the software that's running, and cryptography is mostly software. So just to finish on this, but to the point, there are some that are starting. We could do with more, obviously. We could do with more buy-in. So hopefully, lots of comments will go their way and help them develop the best CBOM that we can have. And options for particular industries might also apply, but there do exist some, and now hopefully we're going to get.
All right.
Fantastic. I think,
Go ahead.
Rob, we're out of time.
Yeah, I was going to do one last question while you guys are here, and then we'll close it up and with thank you. So putting this panel together was a fascinating experiment in time zones. So I just want each of the panelists to quickly say where you're currently sitting on the planet and what time it is. Start with Mark.
It is currently 15:45 in the afternoon in sunny London, UK.
All right, Marin.
Hi, it's 5:45 p.m. for me. I'm currently in Riyadh partying with Trump.
All right. Kawin. Nice drop.
It's currently 9:45 p.m. I am based in Bangkok, Thailand.
Awesome. Konstantinos.
It is 10:45 a.m. I'm in New York City.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I'm in 10:45. It's just where we are circling the planet right now on this panel, and that should tell you a lot of the expertise that we have brought together. This has been extremely exciting. I need to listen to this again. There's a lot of questions I have, but I feel that if I ask a question, that's one of the, I'm sure there's a lot of folks in the audience have the same issue. So you ask a question, you're not sure. It's like, that was a basic question or, but again, that's generally the way things you go when you're learning this stuff. And I appreciate everyone that is an attendee that threw in a question and did the upvoting. So we, listen to the questions you want. I'm going to try and carve out the rest of the questions and drop them in the Slack channel. So if any of the panelists want to hang out for a little bit and take some slices of that, would be more than happy for you guys to do that.